Our keynote speaker today is passionate about empowering communities to help each other to meet their needs, circulate social capital, and increase economic mobility. Her work is mainly focused on serving communities underserved and overlooked by technology, like education, government, communities of faith, grassroots organizations. Her name is Mara Zepda, and she loves to connect with leaders, allies, foundations, and impact investors seeking to partner with companies that measurably improve users' lives. So today, Mara will be talking to us about the financial side of your business world. Mara, are you with us? She is there, but she is not switching on her camera. There she is. Ta-da! And you need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. It's
Welcome.
Wonderful. It's wonderful to see everyone, and I'm so happy to be here today. As you probably know, I'm in the States. I'm in a place called Columbia, South Carolina, and I recently moved here. And I see that I'm a bit blurry. Hold on one second. Let me just try to recalibrate my camera here. I don't know what just happened. Am I still blurry to everyone? Wait 1 second here.
Have you had your first cup of coffee? That might be why you're blurry.
I know. Okay. Is that any better? I think that's a little bit better. It has a point.
It looks like your lens is kind of frosted up.
Hold on. I'm going to correct this.
Okay. It's fine. It's fine.
It's like we're doing I'm not aiming to do some type of filter. It's just a little bit blurry today. Okay. I think that's better. Hello. Hello. Good to see everyone. It's just wonderful to be here today, and I'm so happy to chat a little bit. Something that you should know about me is that my background is actually as an artist. And so I tend to do things in a creative fashion that's in response to what I'm hearing. I'm not somebody that prepares presentations with the goal of just regurgitating things to you, because I actually really like to be in community and dialogue. And to speak very vulnerably, it's only in the last year, really, with COVID and with Zoom, that I've been able to play with formats that are much more aligned with who I am, rather than doing keynotes where I'm like, and these are all of my slides. So I would love to make this as much of a dialogue as possible. And I'd also love to share with you what I've learned through Zebras Unite. So I think I know that we have about 30 minutes together. Is that right? Okay. So if it's okay with you, what I would like to do is kind of 3 things. One, I'd love to just give you an overview of the story. And I really enjoy taking questions as I'm telling the story, because it allows me to be responsive to what's coming up for you. So as I'm telling the story, if you have questions about key moments, or if you're interested in learning more, let's have it be a dialogue. I'm not interested in just talking at you. So I would love to do that just for about 5 or 10 minutes. I'll put some links in the chat so that you're able to orient around the story. I don't tend to like slide presentations very much, because I enjoy seeing your faces and not looking at my slides. And then the next 10 minutes, what I'd love to do is just actually go into a case study of what you all just described around sociocracy and governance. And we had something come up yesterday, in fact, and I would love to actually walk you through how we did decision-making about it, because I'm somebody, at least, who really learns by seeing concrete examples in the world, rather than me putting up a PowerPoint slide that says, like 3 tips for effective leadership. I would actually just like to walk you through a situation that I encountered yesterday, so that you can receive some of the fresh wisdom, and I'd love to hear yours. And then maybe we can spend the final 15 minutes doing some questions, if that sounds good to you. So does that sound like a good agenda? All right, let's do it. Okay, so could I get a volunteer actually to support me in some linking, so that I can share, and is somebody willing to open a Google tab and drop some links in as I'm talking? Can I get a volunteer? Awesome. Okay. Veronica or Claudio, you want to do it?
I can help. It's not a problem.
Okay, Veronica will do it. All right. Okay.
We both will do it.
Okay, this will be fun, actually, because I've never tried this before, but I think it'll be neat. So I am an entrepreneur, and I'm a very reluctant entrepreneur. I have a difficult time using that title even still. I think of myself foremost, I'm the daughter of artists. So my mother is a cellist, and my father was a painter from Honduras. I think of myself mostly as a child of artists. And what that means, do we have any other children of artists on the call? I always like to Okay, or people who grew up in creative spaces. So one feature of growing up with parents that are very creative is that you're constantly coming up with ideas, and it's a feast and famine situation. So sometimes my father would sell 4 paintings and we would get to go out to eat that night. And then other times, you know, you're having to cut corners. And so that makes you extremely creative, because it means that what my experience of that has been is that it's never about resource constraint. Anytime there's a resource constraint, it's always an opportunity to just get very creative and to work in community, which is what all of you were just talking about. What are the definitions of community? I'm sure, have any of you on the call kind of experienced that sense of being helped by others in your life? I would hope. Yes, okay. So I think that's my definition of community, is that sense of reciprocity and care. The second culture that I very much identify with is I was a reporter. So I was trained as a journalist and a radio reporter. Here in the States, we have something called National Public Radio. And as a reporter, there are a couple of qualities and features that are really helpful for entrepreneurship. One is just insatiable curiosity. So you're constantly asking questions. And as a reporter, you're taught that it's not stupid to ask questions. So that was a huge feature. The other is just a sense of investigation. So really, I was an economic reporter, which meant following the money. And I would say that even, you know, you all as entrepreneurs or whatever ventures you have, everybody should be following the money. So that was a second key part of who really made me who I was. And then I would say the third thing that is really inspiring to me is just learning from other people. I'm a lifelong student. I have continued my education in all sorts of realms and areas, from depth psychology to work in calligraphy. And so something to know about me is that I don't spend my free time, you know, reading business books. And I think that kind of makes my brain work a bit differently. So all that is to say, I started as an entrepreneur. We started a company called Switchboard, and we were serving the higher education market. And then it became very clear that the type of capital that we needed did not exist. So we had raised about $1 million in venture capital. We were building a profitable, sustainable company. And that's kind of kryptonite for venture capital, because you aren't exiting your company. You aren't selling your company and exiting it. And if there's no exit, in the words of Camus, then there's no upside for your investors, right? So what you have essentially, our company is not unique. You know, 99 out of 100 startups, quote unquote, fail. But they're actually not failing, they're finding their own way. And the reason that Zebras Unite exists is to support those 99 other startups that are finding their own way, because we believe that there's inherent genius and creativity in the other ways that they are finding. And every time they discover a new financing mechanism, a new way of incorporating their business, a new way of creating a different type of culture. You can think of it kind of like the Cambrian explosion, you know, which was this time that we had all of this ecological and species diversity. And that's what we're in right now. And that's really what we're aiming to foster with chapter leads like Douglas and others who are bringing their creativity and gifts to the movement. So in 2017, we wrote a post called Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break, which I think Claudio is already getting. I love it. We're on the same page. And that blog post really articulated a set of principles that are core to what makes the movement the movement. So we were interested in companies that were about mutualism. In other words, how do we work together rather than just kind of this hero at the top? They were about cooperation rather than, you know, how do we silo work into these very structured buckets. They were about creating prosperity, not only for the people that were creating value, but for the communities that our companies are situated in, right? So we didn't see ourselves as isolated tech companies. We wanted to be in relationship with the location and spaces we were in. You'll see on the zebra chart, other principles were about, you know, shared prosperity rather than winner takes all, sustainable growth rather than hockey stick. And we just put this out there, the four of us, really to say, this is our experience of entrepreneurship. This is what we believe. We've seen this other animal, in opposition to a unicorn. Zebras are real. They're both black and white. They can be for purpose and for profit. But the most important feature of a zebra, and what makes all of you a zebra now, and part, is that in order to evade predators, zebras get in herds, and those herds are called a dazzle. And the stripes confuse the predators. So the way that they survive is, one, to be together. They recognize they're stronger together. And two, because they are not clearly one thing, it's actually in the diversity of their stripes and the blur of their stripes that makes them safe. And that's a key part of this movement. We are not asking you to be one thing. You don't have to be a hockey growth startup. You don't have to fit these norms of raising venture capital. Whatever expression that is most aligned with who you are, what the value is you wish to create, we're here to foster that and to uplift it as being incredibly valuable and something that the world needs. And so that's a pretty unique feature of our movement, is that we aren't aiming to have people pattern match to one venture funded style hockey stick growth tech company. So Claudio is reading my mind at this point, because what we ended up then having to do was to figure out what is the corporate structure that will enable us to actually hold this diversity of experience. And so we landed on, in the States, what's called a limited cooperative association, or an LCA. And that cooperative has inside of it, there's a nonprofit that holds the golden share. So if you go to the article Claudio just put in, a pivot to people, you'll see our how we've incorporated. So this solves a couple of things, which I won't really go into, but basically in the States, our particular challenge is that you can get capital for philanthropic grant funded projects. So there's philanthropy and grant funding. And there's not a lot of capital for cooperatives, right? And so if you are able to create a mutualistic relationship at arm's length between a nonprofit and a cooperative, you can start to do creative things like having the cooperative deliver on the services that you might get grants for. So that's one aspect of creative financing that's essentially, because philanthropies are not able to invest directly in co-ops, but we can say the nonprofit is a shareholder of that co-op. And so when we are in service to growing the co-op, we are also in service to growing the nonprofit. So I won't get into the nitty gritty of the way that our financing works, or the way that our corporate structure works, except to say that we invented a structure. It took about a year and a lot of, it was a very expensive process to come up with this, but our hope is that all of you can be saved the brain damage and any type of form that you might like to create. Our bylaws are open sourced. If you have any questions, you can find them. I'm happy to answer them. So really the corporate formation and the legal documents that we invested in are a key part of one of the resources that we hope to share with the community. So fast forward, we incorporated, and we are now a global movement of over 25 chapters around the world. And the communities like you are just extraordinary. What's really special to me is that each community is making the zebra ethos uniquely theirs. So, you know, what you all are doing is very different from what we see in Scotland, is very different from in Japan. Their focus is on century-old companies. And so the regional specificity of each culture's zebras is extremely exciting. I'll briefly just talk about I know that we wanted to focus on the economics and capital. And so what I'd like to do now maybe is let's take the questions now, and then we'll go into the case study at the end, because I want to make sure that we're getting the questions you have. So in terms of capital and finance and how we might build these companies differently, I'd love to just hear from folks, what would be the most useful aspect for me to talk about today that you have questions about?
I'd be curious to know, Mara. Hi, my name's Alan. Thank you. It's fascinating hearing you talk about this. I'm interested, and I've been looking at B Corps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, your relationship with them, whether you looked at that as well as part of your journey.
Yes. So B Corps are great. And do you have them in, obviously they're global, right? They're in,
Yeah.
So yeah, Claudia, feel free to drop the B Lab and B Corp links. So B Corps, for those of you that don't know, are it's basically a type of certification. So like LEED, you know, the way that buildings can be environmentally certified. B Corps, you certify you based on a very long checklist of you know, sustainable practices that you might have. And so the certificate, we have a lot of zebras that are B Corps, but not all. So we have many B Corps that are zebras, but not all zebras are B Corps, is the way that I'll put it. And the reason why is because if you look at the list of the requirements for certifications, a lot of tech companies or tech-enabled platforms, simply a lot of what they're requiring is not entirely in alignment with their businesses. And also the certification process is very long, and also it's expensive. Mm-hmm. So for some community, so in other words, I guess what I'll say there is that we love all types of certifications that are indicating that the business is more ethical and sustainable, but we don't believe that there's one checklist that's going to encapsulate a rubber stamp of you being that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So similarly, like we have many cooperatives. There are many cooperatives that are zebras, but not all zebras are cooperatives. Shel Silverstein has this poem about the zebra. Claudio, if you can find that, I'll give you points, which is, you know, are you black with white stripes, or are you white with black stripes? Are you happy on sad days, or are you sad on happy days? And it's this really dualistic binary thinking of like, the last thing we would want to do is say everybody should be a B Corp, right? Because the moment that you point to a linear path, you're actually reinforcing what we all hate about the status quo, which is that immediately makes things exclusive and people are excluded from a movement, which is not what we want to do. We're here for all of you, everyone that's on this call. So that's a great question, Alan. And certainly if folks are interested in that type of certification process, I would say B Corp is a good one to look at.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm looking at that for my own business, and yeah, it's quite scary what the process is and the amount of time, trouble involved in it. But this is a great alternative, and the timing is brilliant, because I've just been looking at B Corps over the last few months.
I think the question is, many people come to us in that way, and what they're really looking for underneath the B Corp is, help me understand best practices for how I can run my company. Help me understand how I can build a different culture that doesn't reinforce the status quo. Help me find other service providers in a marketplace that allows me to grow my business.
Absolutely.
Right? And so when you look under the motivations for B Corp, that's what Zebras Unite, the co-op and our community, is interested in providing for you. You know, help me find aligned capital to grow my business, or help me influence investors so that we can create different types of capital. So we don't want to turn that into some type of certification program that's expensive and onerous and hard. We just want you to get those resources as fast as possible.
Yeah, like-minded people, and do business with people who similar values, purpose-driven, all of that. And perhaps that's a great way in without needing to do all the certification. So that's fascinating. Thank you.
The poem is, I'll put it here. It's Shel Silverstein Zebra poem, but that Audrey Long Award poem is actually a wonderful one too. What other questions do people have about either the financing or just more broadly some of the topics that we're talking about now? I'm curious, are most of you founders? What is the stage of business that you're in? Yes, most of you are founders. So what is one challenge that you are facing right now that's bottlenecking? One thing that you've encountered that's confounding about the startup experience? Okay.
I can share, Mara. This is also one of the reasons why me and Veronica got into Zebras Unite in the first place. I don't know if you remember it. I saw you first in Copenhagen, where yes. There was this community leadership event, and when I heard you and Jen talk, I was just like, now I know there's a language for it. And when I shared it with Veronica, we started base already at that time. And when I shared it with Veronica, she was also like, oh, now we can identify ourselves. So I think one of the things that I personally was helped by was having a language to share the type of vision, the type of work, and the type of culture that I would want to promote. And this is also what for me is like, oh, how can we make this, this shared language? We were just talking about it in the session a while ago of shared, what's this understanding of what community. So maybe how can we make this more mainstream, this having this shared language about why we need to have more zebras rather than unicorns?
Absolutely. That's such a good point. Yeah. I mean, do people here feel like you found your people? Do you feel as though you're in community with other entrepreneurs that are building in similar ways? Is there a sense, we built this movement for ourselves because we felt very lonely. So Sarah, you're saying thumbs up. You do feel like you have your people? Oh, I can't hear.
Sarah, you're muted.
Found him here.
You found them here. Good. That's great.
No, I do also build a community, but it's not easy. I feel like I've been alone for many, many years. And it's just so refreshing to finally say, there's other people who think like I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The isolation is very difficult. I think in the darker days, it felt like what I was doing was not valuable, and I questioned whether I was on the right path. So for me to be able to find fellow travelers has just validated that following my intuition is right, that the way that I'm doing things differently is rewarded by being in community, but it does take time to find those people. I think up here, someone had said regarding kind of the challenge, wearing too many hats, Mentor Jam, do you want to talk about that and just what that experience has been like? I think it's Estelle.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to find my unmute button. Yeah, let me turn my camera on. So yeah, for me, definitely being in that situation where I am having to multitask just generally as a job description is pretty challenging. So wearing so many different hats almost every single day, no day ever looks the same. For me, that is just such a massive, massive challenge. I like multitasking, but it's taking it to the next level.
Totally.
So yeah.
Well, let me, that actually brings us into a really good place to talk about this case study, if you're okay with going into that, because I think that will, what we are doing at Zebras might help you, or you might have ideas about how to do it. So let me show you really quickly. I think it was Lana that you were talking about sociocracy. I wasn't on the video yet. Yes. Okay. We are, Paolo, maybe, or Claudio, sorry, maybe you can put the Sociocracy for All website, and we can talk a little bit about sociocracy, because that is how we do, that is how we govern ourselves. So I'll share my screen. Was able to see my screen? Okay, so when we incorporated, I just want to say off the bat that it doesn't matter what your corporate form is, you can choose to behave in a cooperative way in your culture. So this, what I'm about to describe with sociocracy, any company could choose to organize themselves in this way. It's not like you have to be a co-op to implement something that I'm talking about. So I just want to say that off the bat. There's culture, and then there's governance, and then there's corporate form. And people sometimes mix those up, but they're actually quite different. So you can be any type of corporate form, but you can choose to behave in a cooperative way in your culture, which is what I was to impress upon today. That if I said to all of you, go out and become co-ops, or go out and become some, very esoteric corporate form that's going to take you years and be a total nightmare for you, I don't want that. What I'm interested in is ways that what we've done at Zebras might be able to benefit your culture and the type of culture that your companies have. So the way that Zebras Unite works is what Lana described as sociocratic. And this framework we kind of made our own. So the way that sociocracy works is that you have different what are called circles. So each one of these purple circles has what's called a circle lead. In other words, a leader of that domain. So we have someone who leads on infrastructure, someone who leads on operations. Each one of these little circles you see here has a leader. And then when we make, and that leader largely has domain over what they do in their circle. So you can think of this almost like a very large C-suite of a number of executives. Those are those circle leads. So we're peers. I don't sit on top of any one person. Those circles have what's called a charter. And the charter describes what the circle does, how they make decisions, how often they communicate, and who else is in their circle, and what the roles are. So sometimes there's a note taker, there might be a facilitator. So my title is managing director, but I perform managing director because the status quo of our power structures requires that there's someone at the top in charge. So I perform managing director, but I'm really a peer with all of these other circles. So the circle that I lead is called classical to jazz. And I won't get into that except to say there's a lot of money and resources available that are tied up with incredibly stodgy, old institutional ways of thinking, especially when it comes to philanthropy. And my job is, as the daughter of a musician, to translate the classical into resources that will fuel this jazzier new way of being. So I needed a creative name for my circle, and that's what I came up with, is classical to jazz. So these, each of these circles then can be in relationships. So sometimes I just joined up with the membership circle last week. We went to an event, and the goal was we were going to identify certain types of institutional members for the co-op. And so we did a joint project together. So circles can come together to do joint projects and so on. So before I go into the case study, does anyone have any questions about this general way of this different type of structure that allows for a different type of culture that's far more participatory, cooperative, transparent? I don't want to call it horizontal, but it's a more peer-based structure of how you might think about working with your team. Any questions about some of the circle structure and sociocracy?
Is it related to the holocracy? I know the words sound similar in the rhythm of them, of the words and the number of syllables, but it looks holocratic, if there's such a word, in the sense of it being very peer related and open culture.
It's a cousin of holocracy, exactly. What I understand the distinguishing feature to be is this middle general circle, which is where all of us, when we sit in that space, when we gather in the general circle, we're making decisions as a team. And so there's just a more defined container in sociocracy for the culture of coming together to make decisions that I think is less structured in holocracy. Another great resource, Claudio, that I'll have you put in the chat is, I think it's community.rule. And Community Rule is a project that helps you to think about the type of governance structure you wish to adopt. And governance really just means, how are you going to communicate with the people that you are working with in a way that feels good? And there are many different types of ways to do that. There's a thing called a duocracy, which is literally like the person that does it is the person that gets to make the decision, right? We have a form called circles. There's democratic decision-making, there's consensus-based decision-making, there's consent-based decision-making. So if you go to community.rule, that's a project from one of our board members, Nathan Schneider, whose work I highly encourage you to check out. And a lot of the challenges that you may be facing as a founder are actually they're governance challenges, because you maybe don't have a method for how you're making decisions. And I would challenge you to think about it this way, even if you don't have any team members yet, how are you personally as a founder making decisions, right? Are you waking up every day and are just like, I'm just going to do it? versus are you in relationship, let's say, with your end users or your customers, right? And now they're becoming stakeholders in the company. So a lot of what Zebras Unite does is think about what is the architecture and the experience of being in relationship with one another. And governance is what that's called. And there's a lot of different patterns and resources that are out there. So other questions or thoughts about circles, and if this is resonating, if you have questions, if you've been challenged by some of the ways that you've been expected to show up.
I think if people are still digesting, Mara.
Yeah, okay, well, let's go into a case study. I'll go into a case study in the final time that we have. So I want to I'll paint the picture of what happened yesterday. I had being a founder is basically having really hard conversations all the time and trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's adult and cooperative and doesn't hurt people. And what ended up happening, so you can imagine each one of these circles needs to deliver certain things. I have certain revenue targets. The infrastructure circle has certain technology that they're building. The operations circle needs to make sure our finances are dialed. The membership circle needs to make sure our members are being served. The capital circle needs to make sure that founders are getting information about alternative capital. And the question arose that one of the circles, I felt disappointed and frustrated by one of the circles. And in the traditional hierarchy of how things go, the managing director, would like shake their finger and be like, this isn't going well. And you would have this confrontational relationship, which is not the culture that we wish to engage in. So we had to develop essentially a restorative practice. How might we develop a policy that will enable circles to raise issues and to take accountability? So I just want to quickly show you how we resolved that. We went over to Asana, which is what we use in our how to organize ourselves. And you'll see these are all of our circles, right? So this is my classical to jazz circle. This is the capital circle. We have these circles. And what we did.
The learning circle.
We have the learning circle that Claudia is leading, exactly. So I'll quickly just show you what we did here. I'm sorry, I can't expand this. I can do this way. So I said, this is what happened. We have this process, right? So I park in Asana. I want to engage in a mutual accountability process. And I'm currently playing this inappropriate role. And there was this tension that was raised around a circle that caused people hurt. So we need to develop a process that allows us to be in relationship and to engage in conflict so that I can be mutually accountable to my peers and they can give me feedback, right? So then Shiza, who has the operations circle, takes this on and says, thank you, I agree. We can all benefit from a restorative process. Sassy, who has all of this facilitation experience, says, I want to just make a distinction that there's conflict between circles, there's conflict between people, and then there's conflict between processes, right? Between accountability, right? So she comes in and chimes in with the distinctions of how we encounter conflict. And then Astrid shows her appreciation. And so, she says, I love your humanity. I'm looking forward to evolving our human-centered people ops. And that's really what we're doing here, right? So now the operations circle, I put that in the operations inbox. The operations circle now has the task to figure out how do we develop a conflict resolution and an accountability process. And that's what I just want to show you materially. That's what it looks like to be in relationship as circles, right? Where you take a loaded moment, you put it into the center, and all of you come together to actually begin to work on figuring it out. We have 1 minute left. Are there any, I would love to just get people's lightning round reflections on, what I shared with you. What is one word that comes to mind, something that you learned, a way that you're feeling? What is an emotion that you're feeling? What is a word? What is a question? Just love to get a quick read on the room before I leave. You can throw it in the chat, or Rick. Yes, Rick, go for it.
Super organized.
Nice.
Amazing. Mara, is there something we can share with other people about circles? Some
Yes.
reading, some reference.
So
I
what
was looking for in the Google, but couldn't find it.
The Sociocracy website is the best one that you threw in there, Claudio.
Yes.
That's
Look.
yeah, and then so here first I'll just invite all of you to join. Whoops. And so we have one final open enrollment period in December. Claudio, Veronica, and Lana can tell you all about what it means to be a Zebras Unite member and the community there. And then Community Rule is the website that has these templates. That includes, if you go to the templates, it's kind of a bit hard to. So these are the templates for governance. So if I were to give you one piece of homework, it would be choose how you wish, what the culture is that you wish for your company or startup to embody by choosing one of these templates. Then you can actually click into it, and Nathan has made it really easy. It's like a Mad Lib. You can plug in. It helps you to create your governance. And then the other quick website I'll throw you is Exit to Community, which is this whole body of work that I did, that Zebras Unite did in partnership with Nathan around these companies that are looking for different styles of exit that involve community. And if you look at the primer, that's a 75-page zine. That's a free resource that gives you a lot more information about this. So those are a bunch of resources. As a final reminder, join the co-op. We have a free online community. So you can also just join the online community if you want to get a sense first. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And I really appreciated this time together. And I'm so grateful for it being not me speaking with the PowerPoint every time. I don't get to do that. Is a life-affirming day for me.
You're in the right space, Mara.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you so much. Be well. Take care.
Thank
What
you,
I want to
Veronica.
point out-
Sharing.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
See
Thank you
soon.
very much.